Good evening. Apologies for a slight delay to the meeting. Welcome to the Joint Cabinet Committee of Stratford-on-Avon and Warwick District Councils here at Elizabeth House. Welcome particularly to colleagues from Warwick District, members of the public and those watching online. We'll sort the cameras out so you can see more than the top of my head in a moment. Just some housekeeping for those in the building. If there is a fire alarm, it won't be a test, so we need to exit the building and reconvene in the car park opposite. So that's it. The first item is to elect a chair for the meeting. So can I have anyone to propose a chair, please? Councillor Davison. Councillor Junior, thank you. Any other nominations? No. Okay, a seconder for Councillor Junior to chair. Councillor Coles, thank you. Councillor Junior, you're chairing the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I do understand that there's been some delays caused by an accident coming in from Warwick. I'm glad to see people here safe, but I do not know that it's caused some delays, and I hope it's not caused any injuries or anything to anybody else that's on the road today. We've got the Joint Cabinet Committee today, and the first thing to do after having the appointment of the chair is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence here today?
We do. We have apologies from Councillor Fulp and apologies from Councillor Whalley-Hoggins.
And do we have any disclosures of interest? No disclosures of interest. Do we have anybody that's due here but is delayed, actually? Yes?
We have Councillor Williams, who said he'd probably be here about 15:15.
Councillor Milton, similarly, is being delayed by traffic.
That's what we expected, but we are quorate, so we can continue with your permission. That I'm happy to carry on. The first item is the minutes of the previous meeting. Do I have anybody that is willing to just say that that the minutes were acceptable to the Councillor Coucher, and all the rest? Anybody? Secondly, Councillor King, and you're all in favour of that the minutes were as you remember them to be. And it's all agreed. They're all agreed. Okay. I think the next stage is to receive any questions or comments from members of the public before we begin and go into debate ourselves. Am I correct on that?
So, Chairman, we're moving on to item 5, and yes, you can receive the member of the public before you start the debate. Thank you.
Are there any members of the public that would like to say anything before we start? I know that Councillor Rock wanted to say something. Are you happy to? And then there is another gentleman as well. Mr. George Martin from the members of the public.
Good evening, Chair, and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to me. The document, the South Warwickshire Local Plan document going to the consultation, pays lip service to climate change, carbon reduction, energy efficiency, particularly in relation to developments, settlements, buildings, and also it lacks ambition. Let me read for you Strategic Objective 6, contributing towards net zero carbon targets. And I quote, ensuring that new development does not cause a net increase in carbon emissions and taking positive action to achieve net zero. Does anyone in the room think that this document delivers this? Does it deliver a not causing net increase in carbon emissions? Can I suggest that your consultants look at the work that's been carried out by Bioregional in developing planning and carbon modelling for central Lincolnshire, Greater Cambridge and others to identify the lowest carbon route for new developments and settlements? Section 7.4, new net zero carbon buildings. The document proposes a definition for what is meant by net zero carbon. You've chosen the UK GBC definition, which is okay. However, the document does not, in fact, apply this definition. The UK GBC definition for operational carbon includes for both regulated and unregulated carbon. But the document proceeds only on the basis of regulated carbon. We'll not get to net zero unless we include unregulated carbon. Part A, residential buildings, criteria 1, carbon reductions. The document states for new dwellings, a minimum 63% reduction in carbon emissions, as compared to the baseline emission rates for building regs, Part L, 2021, SAP 10.2. Designing with SAP does not deliver in terms of reducing the performance gap. WDC, Warwick District Council, already know this in a document they published on the 21st of January 2022. The WDC DPD on net zero carbon uses SAP and is not where this local plan should start. This needs a step change. The consultation document should show ambition and move towards what is known as energy unit intensity, measured in kilowatt hours per metre squared per year, a number and not a percentage reduction. There are more than 80 local authorities building to the Passive House standard at the moment. In Warwickshire, you have Warwickshire Rural Housing Association, which has delivered 21 of these high efficiency properties in the last 10 years. Warwick District Council have regrettably delivered none. If you don't deliver to high standards, the energy costs for occupants will be higher. Do you want developments in terms of anywhere homes, another of my pet hobbies? Do you want developments resulting from this plan to look like the developments that you have over the last 20 years? Are you proud of everywhere architecture? The plan needs variety of architecture and placemaking. Non-residential buildings. The document proposes BREEAM very good. This is not fit for purpose in terms of getting to net zero carbon buildings. It needs to be BREEAM outstanding or better. And there's no mention of Passive House, neighbours, LEED, many other ways of getting to net zero carbon. Performance gap. There's not one mention of performance gap in nearly 700 pages of the document. And if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. Developers do not want to measure performance. Lastly, external advisory group. As I learned last week when I presented to the ONS meeting in Warwick, it's clear that your consultants are not performing and that the officers are under-resourced. I've mentioned a number of times to the leader...
You have 1 minute left.
Thank you very much. I've mentioned a number of times to the leader of Warwick District Council, Councillor Davidson, of the need to establish an external advisory group to scrutinise and help advise consultants and councillors and officers. Such an initiative will result in savings in terms of consultancy costs and overall time for both councils. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Has anybody got any questions of the member of the public at this stage? I mean, Councillor, sorry, would you like to make your comments?
Yes, I assume I don't make them to the member of the public, but to officers. Is this right? Because they raised quite a few questions.
Ask the officers if they want to raise, if they've got any particular comments. I mean, one of the things that I would personally would say is that as part of the consultation, obviously you will have your chance to put all of that into the consultation as part of the consultation as well. But if you've got any particular question, query about something that he raised that you want to ask officers, then please do.
Yes, I think you're right, Chair, that it's a bit late to make fundamental changes for this stage, although it may be possible later. I wanted to ask officers' views on two comments the member of the public made. One was the performance gap. What is their view on it, and is it being addressed, and could we possibly do something at the later stage? And also this idea of an external advisory group. Is that possible, perhaps in addition or separately at the next stage, compared with using, I think, our external consultants at the moment? Thank you, Chair.
If we could just, do you have any comments that you could make on those particular questions? And forgive me, I should have actually had you, and I will come on to you to do the proper introduction before we go on to have the questions from the rest of the people who are here.
Thank you, Chair. I think in terms of the area of net zero, it is quite a technical area, which is why we've appointed consultants to assist the two councils. So we are very much looking for them as experts in this field to advise us on matters relating to things such as the performance gap. As you will know, Mr. Martin, from our discussion at the scrutiny committee, Warwick Scrutiny Committee, we have appointed consultants Arup to do quite a bit of work for us around kind of climate change and environmental matters. And one of the pieces of work we have asked them to produce for us is a specific document around net zero and net zero policies. Unfortunately, we are in a position whereby we haven't got the final version of that report at this point in time. Therefore, that is why the preferred options document doesn't necessarily set out the robust policies that we ultimately would like to see with regards to net zero. And I think across both officers and members, we do want to see very stringent policies around net zero, which do cover both regulated and unregulated energy. But simply put, we haven't received all of that expert advice at this point in time to really develop those policies in this particular document. But the key thing is, this isn't the final version of the plan. The next stage of the plan, the Regulation 19 publication submission, that will be ultimately the plan that we are looking to put forward to an inspector. It is at that point where, if we don't have those policies right, I think you would be right to be raising those concerns. But I think we, as officers, probably share your views that we want to go beyond the great starting point that Warwick has with its net zero carbon DPD, but we want to go beyond that. We want to ultimately ensure that we've got a plan that an inspector finds to be sound, so it needs to be consistent with national policy. It also needs to be viable and deliverable, but net zero policies should be at the heart of this plan. And indeed, you know, one of the, I think, 6 principles that underpin the plan does relate to net zero.
Thank you very much indeed. Anybody else want to come in? Do you want to come in at this point?
Thank you, Chair. I think in respect to the second point about an external advisory group, I think we'd take that away and think how that could work in practice. I think there can be a number of benefits to that. We do have a wider officer group that includes colleagues from Warwickshire County Council and all their specialisms. But yeah, it's how we can make that effective and useful to the process. So we'd take that one away and come up with a solution further. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Before we go into the proper part of the meeting with the other people that will come in that are on the committee, would you like to just do a general introduction to today's meeting and what will be achieved by today's meeting?
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, so the report we're considering, or you're considering today, relates to the South Warwickshire Local Plan and specifically the proposed third major consultation on the plan. So subject to the decisions that will be made by the committee today, it is proposed that the public consultation on the preferred options of the plan will commence in January and run for a period of 8 weeks until March, early March. Members, through the recommendations, are asked to endorse the South Warwickshire Local Plan Preferred Options document for its consultation. In doing so, we do ask members of the committee to note the role of national planning policy in influencing the plan. So there is national planning policy that local plans must be cognizant of and consistent with. In particular, in terms of the approach for identifying housing need. Only today, around lunchtime, has the government issued an updated national planning policy framework, which is the primary document that sets out national policy and the framework from which local plans should be produced and planning decisions made. This national update was expected following a consultation that commenced in July, and both councils sent independent responses to that consultation. Whilst I'm sure both councils won't necessarily welcome all aspects of the updated NPPF, it is welcome in terms of removing an element of uncertainty around plan preparation and in particular the approach to arriving at what is our housing need. It does now mean that the recommendation of the report will now read as slightly out of date, and I think the Chair will come on to proposed amendments in a little while. So there is a proposed amendment to recommendation 1 in light of that, and also a change to recommendation 7. So as indicated earlier, this is the third consultation on the plan following an earlier scoping and issues and options consultations, both of which also included call for sites where landowners and promoters are asked to put forward sites for potential inclusion as allocations in the plan. Since that previous consultation, extensive work has been undertaken by the joint officer team across the two councils, with guidance and a steer on various issues from members of the advisory group, which again is a cross-council, cross-party member group. And so a lot of work has been undertaken to analyse previous consultation responses, continue to produce technical evidence to underpin the plan as well. The sheer breadth of topic areas that the plan needs to cover, reflecting its importance as a major document for both councils, which will influence the districts for many years to come, it does mean that the process of plan production can be lengthy, and inevitably, unfortunately, it means that the documents that we consult on sometimes are also lengthy also. Just in terms of, very briefly, in terms of some detail around the actual consultation, the preferred options is very much options as plural rather than a clearly defined growth strategy with allocations set out and a clear set of policies that will resemble the final plan. There are many more sites put forward in this preferred options document than we know we will actually need in the plan, and there's various reasons for that, in part reflecting uncertainty that we've faced around the level of need we're required to provide for in terms of housing in particular. It also gives us more time to build the evidence base to support the approach to be taken in the next stage of the plan, and work with promoters to better understand the deliverability and infrastructure requirements of sites. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, it does give us an opportunity for genuine consultation with stakeholders, including members of the public, before our views become too focused and too fixed. In terms of policies in the plan, there are a few detailed policies set out in the document. However, there are many more policy directions which set out the direction of travel for policies that we may ultimately plan to include within the South Warwickshire Local Plan. Within the plan, we do need to deliver a significant number of homes across South Warwickshire. So the National Standard Method, as updated today, provides us with a figure we need to meet of homes we need to deliver of 2,188 new homes across South Warwickshire per annum. That equates to 54,700 new homes over a 25-year period. However, that figure doesn't account for existing allocations, and therefore we don't need to find sites to deliver up to that full amount because we already have sites that are allocated which help us deliver quite a substantial amount of that need. So I think the need to find is closer to around 28,000. Nearly there, Chair. As well as housing, the proposals in the preferred options do seek to deliver a significant amount of additional employment land and floor space, and ultimately new jobs within South Warwickshire. The employment need figures, and there's a recommendation on this in the report, they've been derived by both sub-regional and regional technical evidence base, and then locally in South Warwickshire we've also had a South Warwickshire specific employment study produced. So in meeting our needs, we are clear that the plan should take a brownfield first approach. However, evidence does demonstrate that this won't be sufficient. We won't have sufficient previously developed land to meet our needs, and therefore it will be necessary to develop on some greenfield land in order to fully meet those needs. Ultimately, the plan has been prepared to ensure we are delivering sustainable development and focusing growth in the most sustainable locations. The plan is supported by a sustainability appraisal, which I would note is an iterative process, and so at the next stage of the plan making process, we will be updating and refining that sustainability appraisal to reflect the position at that point in time. There are 7 recommendations in the report, so I won't go through those, but obviously we as officers are asking members to vote on the 7 recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
What I'll do now is bring in comments from the advisory group chairs, then the comments from the overview and scrutiny chairs, then comments from opposition leaders, and then comments from portfolio holders. So we'll start with the comments from the advisory group chairs, and those are Councillor Day and then Councillor Rock, if that is all right with you in that order. Councillor Day first, and then Councillor Rock.
If I may, Chair, I'll allow Councillor Rock to go first.
Absolutely fine.
Thank you.
And thank you for your courtesy.
Thank you very much. Councillor Day and I have had a brief conversation earlier today and very many conversations in between. So thank you very much. And only very briefly, just picking up a few points. Neither of us are intended to demolish the whole document. But just a few points. Should I cover all of these, Andrew? Yeah. So we spoke earlier today. I think the first point we want to make is that although this document and the many previous ones we've gone through the advisory group, this is not a recommendation from the advisory group. These papers have gone through and generally speaking they've been noted. There's a huge number of very large documents that we've received in very short order, and in fact I'll turn to the timetable because we're under those pressures. and the advisory group recognises those pressures, and we want to stick to that timetable. We realise there's a project management project, if you like, on here, and we want to stick to that timetable and get the job done. So we don't want to see any backsliding, but there's a lot to be done in a short time, and we recognise that time pressure. We did at the last meeting talk about the timetable, and I see that the end date has been put in the additional question here. We talked about that at the last meeting. I think the feeling was that we want to stick to that end date. We didn't want to divide it up in some way, so we were supporting that. Noting there's that balance between the uncertainties at the end of that long period. But we want to deliver the infrastructure, and the only way we're going to do that is by having a longer plan period. Clearly identifying all these sites, the large number of sites, which we know, we don't want all those sites. I mean, I think that's quite clear, even with the increased numbers that we've seen today. That's more than we would need to meet the demand that's been identified. And that's quite a small number that's increased. I think I worked it out today. It's about 2.7% extra, isn't it, than we were anticipating. But some of the members felt that perhaps we didn't need to put so many in, setting hairs running, and possibly when they have been identified, when some of them perhaps we know are unlikely to come forward. And some of the scoring of those sites has had to be worked out on what we've got now rather than what we would have. So it considers, for instance, what bus stops are there, which is really getting into quite small detail. And just a couple of small points. At the last meeting, it's repeated in this report, within the Gypsy and Travellers report, and I've mentioned this to officers in an email. It's got the number of boat dwellers in there, and I believe that to be an error. There's an error in the numbers, and I think that's got to be revisited, and I think officers have agreed with that. So I mentioned that. We can't let that go. That's got to be investigated. Another point that I would ask you to consider for an amendment today, I'm afraid I'm an engineer, and I'm probably going to be a bit picky here, but it talks about battery storage. We're talking about a long period. I would like you to change that to energy storage, because battery is the present technology that's been preferred, but there are other ways of storing energies, and let's not confine the solutions to a particular technology. Let's make it as wide as we can. Now, your public speaker did talk about the environmental aspects. When we set out doing it, and I think, I've looked around the room today, I think I'm the longest serving member on the advisory group, and I've been there in various guises through the continuity at the beginning. And I think there's a slight element of lost in translation here. When we started off with this, we wanted an environmentally led plan. And that seems to have got, this is not intended to be a criticism, but it's gone through various hands, and we've emerged with this document that's going to go out to consultation. And I think some of that environmental messages has got a bit diluted. When we look at some of the sites that have been put forward, a lot of these are very car dependent, and it's just an observation I make, and I would like that to be borne in mind. So it's a long chatter, Andrews, but over to you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you, Chair. Well, firstly, for the benefit of joint cabinet members, can I say the advisory group members have contributed. It has been a challenging forum, held in confidence, and we've had some extensive expert reports. And you think you've got a weight of paper before you this evening. I can assure you what we've been working through has been considerably more than that. Having said that, that challenge has, I believe, brought us to a point where we have a document that can go out for consultation, bearing in points of detail that Councillor Rock has just shared with you. This is ready for the members, our residents, to comment and give us feedback on. This is a very complex document, as you know, and it really faces some significant challenges, not least of which the changing regulatory environment the government has asked us to work within, which we've endeavoured to keep pace with. But I really just want to reassure Cabinet members here today that other councillors on the advisory group have expressed their views vigorously and have been heard. And I really, Chair, wanted to commend our officers, our planning teams, for the hard work that they have put in to accommodate members' views and to listen to the expert advice on which this document before you this evening has been framed. Other than that, of course, I would support Councillor Rock's comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. It's something that I also believe in, that for planning to thrive, it must, must be go through processes which listens to local views and local residents, and that there is a proper process for them to have their say. Moving on, we've got the comments from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee chairs, and Councillor Crump and Councillor Milton. Councillor Crump, do you want to kind of put your views forward and comments forward, and then we can move on after that?
Hopefully I'll speak long enough for Councillor Milton to get here, but I don't envisage speaking too long about this. Obviously I went to the training the other day, which Andrew and Phil and the team did. It was really good, really positive. There's discussions about trying to make it as future-proof as possible. And again, I think the concerns from OSC is how future-proof is it, especially in light of the changes that have been announced today. I certainly agree with Councillor Rock and Councillor Day about sticking to the timetable, because I think members of the public have got some uncertainty, confusion about this, and any delays will add to that confusion, unless there's really strong communication around it. I've had some residents speak to me about it in one or two local hostelries in Southam, just for research purposes, by the way. And they've got some concerns. Obviously, I know, sorry, there were some issues with currently with Warwick's 5-year housing and land supply. Obviously, there's slight change in the NPPF today, potentially to 6 years housing and land supply. So again, there's some concern about how robust is the information that we've got. We wouldn't want this to happen again in the future, because sometimes it's a charter for developers if they've got a sustainable application. If we haven't got the right housing and land supply figures, we don't want to be in that position. We had it, I think, about 2014, 15, something like that. Mr. Buckland's nodding, so I must be in the right direction there. And there were some developments that took place that wouldn't have ideally taken place had we had the core strategy then. So I think we've got concerns about that. I think members of the public, we've really got to engage. I know that Joe mentioned the FAQs that are going to be put out, and are going to be strengthened as well. So I think that's really positive. And this engagement with communities, particularly towns and parishes, is quite vital, because when you look at this, it's quite daunting. When you look online, it's daunting. So whether that can be as simplified as possible, and ask the residents to what we're expecting from them, or what we would like to see from them, I think that would be positive as well. The final point relates to, again, with the developments, making sure we've got the infrastructure, and how reliant are we on cars, sort of thing. And I agree with Councillor Rock and Councillor Day on that. So on the whole, pretty supportive, lots of hard work going on, and having gone through the training, again, the training was excellent, and it was well worth attending, because you sort of got a better view, understand it more. But I do think we really need to engage with our parishes and towns, and I know there are some training sessions next week, I think. So again, I think that needs to be done as well. So if you can get as much information out, much communication, FAQs, and basically asking our residents what we want from them in a simple and a short way, and not ramble on like I have at the moment. But I think that is really positive. So thank you for that.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll move on to comments from the opposition leaders. But if Councillor Milton comes in, because I know of the problems with the traffic, the accident, etc., then I can allow that him to come in at a later stage. I think that is fair given the circumstances. So it's comments from the opposition leaders now, and it's. Shall I bring in Councillor Day? Do you want to add anything extra? And then Councillor Passingham will come in afterwards.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the Conservative group at Warwick District, so they've changed hats. Specifically, our group are concerned about the impact on rural communities, and I appreciate that is a factor across both planning authorities, and specifically the provision of sustainable infrastructure for rural communities. And I think we need to bear in mind the close work we've got to do with our county council colleagues for the sensible provision of public transport, but also active travel routes. And I note that's a program that's ongoing. Rural communities also, as you know, Chair, can face isolation issues if we don't address this as part of a local planning process. And therefore, the forward funding of infrastructure, in particular, making sure that when developers bring forward proposals, they put the infrastructure in place first, not after, when we've had houses built, and we've seen that in my own ward with the country park, for example. The houses are built, but the developers still haven't signed over the land necessary to get on with the country park. It's just unacceptable. So we need to bear that in mind when we take any plan and put it in place, that we actually put the onus not on the council and the taxpayers, local taxpayers, but on developers to provide that infrastructure in advance. Thank you, Chair.
I know that is an issue that has been raised in our council as well. Councillor Passingham.
Thank you. Yeah, we welcome the inclusion of the 12 new settlements, proposed new settlements, and note that they're on generally on existing transport corridors, except perhaps Long Marston, and on the whole they're either on or near rail lines, which makes them even more sustainable. And note that they're all proposed at more than 6,000 houses, which would make them sustainable in terms of infrastructure, having secondary school and other medical facilities as part of the infrastructure. And hopefully that would sorry.
No, just carry on.
That would mean that we can have 20-minute communities in all those new settlements, so it'll be a lot more sustainable in terms of transport. But taking on Councillor Day's point about infrastructure in rural areas, I think that's particularly relevant to south of Stratford, which hasn't got any rail and it's not got good roads, long way to hospitals, and long way for fire engines and so on. So there's a particular problem. So I'm just taking on board the fact that we've got a gap of 28,000 houses. I would have thought the new settlements, if they are all viable, would be able to take an awful lot of those, and they'd be the priority in terms of more housing, rather than places like Shipston that was, instead of gaining infrastructure with all the new housing developments, has lost a hospital and fire service and so on. So it's a particular problem in rural areas, I think, to develop more housing.
Thank you. I don't know whether the Chief Executive, David Buckland, could add something about the Councillor Milton and as Chair of Owen Scrutiny, that may be helpful.
It doesn't look like Councillor Milton has turned up, but what I do have is a summary of the comments that were made at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 4th of December that I could feed back to the Joint Committee, if that's in order. And possibly I'm looking at Phil and Andrew probably, because over there, they might be able to help me if there's any further points of clarification. But in summary, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at Warwick firstly thanked officers for their work to date on the local plan and for facilitating the recent member briefings for all councillors at both Stratford District and Warwick District. Secondly, sought assurance on the transparency and communication around the consultation, particularly with residents and parish councils. The third point that was raised was to ask officers to review future reports on the local plan, provide them in smaller and more focused sections, clearly for residents so they can see how does this affect me. The fourth point welcomed there would be an interactive map available online and asked for the information this would provide. And finally, point 5, asked officers to review various infrastructure delays relating to previous developments and reasons learned to see if similar challenges could be avoided within the proposed local plan.
Thank you. And it,
Any other point?
yes, would you like? Yes, please. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, Andrew and myself were, as well as a number of the councillors in the room tonight, were at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at Warwick. There was a lengthy discussion. I think we were about an hour and 20 minutes on the local plan, so they gave it a very good airing. And I think, well, the summary that's in there is a good reflection of that conversation. There was a lot of discussion around trying to make what is perhaps inevitably a big and possibly difficult to read document as legible, as navigable, as easy to read as possible. And one of the points we made, and we could make it again tonight, is that obviously the report you've got for you, and I think it's Appendix 1, is the preferred options document itself. It's, if I could put it this way, it's fairly flat, it's just a Word document. There will be a lot of formatting, and of course the electronic version will include a lot of hyperlinks so you can navigate your way through the document. And those of you that can remember back to what we did 2 years ago with the issues and options document, we were given that similar challenge by our Overview and Scrutiny Committee at Warwick, and actually we worked with them over the period between the decision and the consultation to try to make it more accessible, and we, you know, it was still a big document, but we did get some positive feedback. The other thing that was widely supported was the use of the interactive map. Now, if any of you have seen the interactive map that's on the local plan website, at the moment it shows all the call for sites, and you can hover over and you can find out more. We're going to use that as the main way of giving people an easy access to finding out about the groups of sites and the areas within their you know, that will be of interest to them. Because, of course, one of the points the Scrutiny Committee made was people will want to fairly quickly find how does the local plan affect me in my community and the particular development in my area. So we're hoping to use the interactive map, which has been well received before, as one of the tools to help the consultation. Thank you.
That is appreciated. Thank you. We now have comments from the portfolio holders. Oh, sorry, Andrew Comfort.
Thank you, Chair. Just adding to Mr. Buckland's comments before, there is a recommendation in there for this committee. So just to flag that, it does say recommendation. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommend to Joint Cabinet there be a significant amount of face-to-face consultation that creates dialogue with residents. And I believe this Cabinet is required to vote on that recommendation.
Appreciated. Thank you very much indeed. Then comments from the portfolio holders. Councillor King, would you like to go first, and then I'll bring in Councillor Coucher.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of the critical points have been mentioned already. I want to start by thanking officers, particularly who have worked from both councils, have worked really hard to keep the timetable on schedule, given how much work has gone into it, and we've laid testimony already tonight to how big the document is, but they have worked incredibly hard to help us understand and to bring us along in that process to get where we are here today. And I think it's testament to how hard they've worked that we've actually achieved a really good understanding of where we are now. I think it's really important to yet again emphasise the point about infrastructure, because we have, all of us, suffered from that not having been dealt with correctly in the past. We have to really hope that we can deal with this better as we move forward now. It's going to be such a significant part of our engagement with the public. One of the first questions that most of us will get about any new developments will be the understandable scepticism about the infrastructure coming at the right time in the development. We have to do all we can to make sure this really happens. As a portfolio holder from Warwick, I do think that the nature of the concentration of developments is a significant one here. We are big supporters here of wanting to increase densities of our developments wherever they are, to make sure that the travel time around encouraging 15 and 20-minute neighbourhoods wherever possible, active travel, and basically, if you like, demoting the role of the motor car to enable healthier and less polluted lives all around us in our communities. That will enable us ultimately to make less use of greenbelt land if we can make more use of current urban spaces and brown and ultimately also grey land. I do think we're all listening very carefully to comments on our obligations to build net zero and very environmentally structured communities, both in the buildings but also the way that we put them together as a community space to make healthy living communities. It is a balance we have to make, because these don't come easily. They don't come as easily as building the kind of housings we have been building, of course. But our duty is to find that balance and to make sure our priorities are really to build these exceptionally energy efficient houses and build communities where people understand the value of these moving forward. But as I say, there are balances to be made in all these things. First and foremost, though, I think the infrastructure thing is something we have to really focus on, because so much hangs from that. Thank you very much, Chair.
And Councillor Coucher.
Thank you, Chair. I would certainly want to echo the comments that Councillor King has made in terms of thanks to all parties, both on the advisory committee, but also all the officers and the work that's gone into this, because this is a very, very important document, and it has been given, I think, the serious attention that it needs to. Chair, we are very keen to make sure that this is not only environmentally sustainable, but also sustainable in terms of communities and community development. And I think that was one of the reasons that we were keen to see some amendment to the vision statement to really make sure that what we are doing here is addressing local needs and also building and strengthening existing communities, and possibly with new settlements creating some new communities as well, rather than perhaps the attitude we've had in the past of just grafting on large housing estates on the edge of a town without really thinking about how it actually integrates or works with it. Infrastructure is made, the issue of infrastructure is made all the time, and many people say, what is infrastructure? It's basically, it's the roads, it's the schools, it's the hospitals, it's the facilities that we need to support civilized living in our area. We have existing infrastructure problems right across the plan area, and we would expect this plan to be addressing those issues. So we've got deficits in terms of education, we have certainly deficits in relation to transport, and any new plan for the future needs to certainly address that. I've had quite a lot of representations made to me already about housing mix, and I echo the point I think that Councillor King made about density, about the need for whatever the new definition of affordable housing is going to be. I mean, I think certainly in Stratford we're looking for a degree of low-cost housing to address the needs of our local population, and to make sure that the housing mix is accordingly. That's probably not mentioned in this plan at the moment, and that will come forward in a further stage. And I think it is important that all people are aware that we are on a journey here, and this is just the latest stage in that journey, and we do want comments back on these issues so that when we get to a Section 19 submission, possibly in a year's time, we will be rather closer to what we want to do. The last point that I want to make is about the plan period. Clearly, we are going forward or proposing potentially to go forward to 2050. That's a long period. We need to make sure that the phasing structure within the plan is absolutely clear. We don't want to be in a position, as we've been in Stratford, of not being very clear on phasing, and therefore the core strategy was approved and we had a huge bulge in housing development and perhaps a dearth coming up towards the end of the plan period. We need to make sure that there is an evenness of delivery across a period of time, and so how we phase development will be very, very important for the future as well. This is an important document. We hope that we will get a lot of representations from all communities and all areas, and that will help us, I think, in our further deliberations as we go forward to produce this very important document. Thank you.
I'm sure we would all echo the comments about having as wide and extensive a consultation response as is possible, and really urging people to do that. The next thing is for questions for officers. Have we got any particular questions that you want to put to officers before we can, on the comments that have been made or the document in general, before we have a more widespread debate between those councillors who've not had chance to speak up until now? Any particular questions anybody wants to raise? No? Have we got any comments then on any debating points from other members of the committee up till now? Would you like to come in and make your point, Councillor?
Not just one point. A lot of good comments been made, thanking officers absolutely. I think it was Nigel who said about being too car dependent. In fact, I think the structure of this consultation is working really hard to reduce that. So obviously we have the new settlements, but the other major ones are clumped together, and that is even in those to really push for 20-minute neighbourhoods. It's already been said, and Chris King mentioned, and as did George Coucher, about increased density. You can do that if you have a relatively large size. So those are hugely important things in the plan. It was also mentioned, I think this was Andrew Day, about issues with housing land supply and not allowing that to happen again. That is clearly something I think is very, very challenging. We do have in Warwick the issue there, so in that sense developers can go and say, look, you're not building out fast enough, therefore you call it a tilted balance, I believe, Andrew and Phil, which means it's harder to stop development in the wrong places, and that is a huge problem. Given the NPPF announcements today, it's going to continue to be a huge problem because, quite frankly, developers don't want to build that fast because their profits will fall. They have sites all primed, all ready to go, and they're not building at the rate to do that. This brings me to the bit where I do disagree with some of the comments made. And George mentioned that we need a clear phasing structure so that if we have loads and loads of sites allocated, they come forwards in a nice orderly way. I'm told around the country that simply doesn't work. We've had several people have mentioned whether there should be a earlier end date to it, and officers have kindly, helpfully allowed us to have detail on this by estimating the number of houses required on green fields, taking away expected windfall sites and existing commitments from the government's mandated figure. That's changed slightly today, but I don't think enough to alter what they've come up with. And that was about 28,000 houses if we go to 2050, and around 13,500 for a 2042 end date. That's to say just under half the area of greenfields would need to be allocated if we go for the minimum required, which is a 2042 end date. In 1.42 to 1.44 of the report, it has been discussed, and some comments have already been made, that there was wide awareness of the 2050 end date for the plan, and there is evidence from public consultation of broad support. However, it's never been given to the public that going to 2050 means double the number of houses allocated on new developments, twice as much greenbelt or other greenfield sites scheduled for concreting over. Given the huge increase in numbers that today was confirmed by central government, it makes great sense to ask the public for their views now. Therefore, as you see on the paper, I propose we add the following recommendation: that the preferred options consultation in Appendix 1 includes a question to seek views on whether a 2042 end date would be preferable, and that in accordance with Recommendation 7, any necessary changes be made to the documentation to include this question. As well as reducing by half the amount of greenbelt and other greenfield sites required, a 2042 end date would also reduce cherry picking of developers who are likely to develop only the most profitable parts of site clusters, leaving new houses without suitable infrastructure, a real splatter gun approach. It has been said already today that the local plan can stipulate when sites come forwards. That doesn't happen well. Developers successfully argue that they should be allowed to build their site when they want to, even if it's due later. Given the build, build, build rhetoric from central government, developers will win if they go to appeal, if we have the temerity to say they should be delayed. Of course, a shorter plan period will mean that the biggest developments will not be finished when the plan ends. This is perfectly normal, and despite what's been said today, is not an issue. What developers and infrastructure providers is a clear master plan for each site, so they'll be able to continue to build them out beyond 2042. Chair, I don't know the procedure. Do I need a seconder for the recommendation? Are there then speeches? Do I have a right of reply at the end before a vote? Thank you.
Do I have a seconder? Thank you very much indeed. And do you want to make a comment at the stage? Before, or would you prefer to wait? It's up to you.
I'm happy to do it now. So thank you for that. Just in terms of going back to the plan as a whole and what we're trying to achieve, I've just noted down the common ground which we're on, which is, I think, is helpful, that we want carbon-friendly developments in the right places, we want the right level of affordability, we have an interest in density, we're aware of the need for infrastructure to be brought forward at the right speed, and we want to create places which are healthy, vibrant places for our communities. And in that, we have some consensus and agreement. I would note, though, that the plan is the words, and what we need to do is deliver that. And in my view, that requires us to be doing things much differently in the future than we've done in the past. And I think that's something that we should all note when taking this plan forward, that if we're doing more than lip speak to this really requires, in the delivery of this plan, us staying tight to those things and ensuring those things actually happen. In terms of the amendment which is in front of us, I was just noting the comments which colleagues made in the introduction here, and I'll just repeat a few of these back to you. So Councillor Rock helpfully made the point that we don't want to get too many hairs running here. If we want to have an engagement with the community, which I think we must have, if we want to serve democracy properly, we need to allow people to be able to put informed comments back. And the amendment which Councillor Davidson has put forward does exactly that. It stops us having too many hairs running. Chair, you yourself very early on told us how important it was to listen to the views of the people. You talked about wide and extensive, I think those were your phrases, wide and extensive engagement. This is a proposal which actually says exactly that. Why don't we listen to what people say? Why don't we ask them in full? And as Councillor Davison has picked out already, we haven't asked them the question properly about whether they would like to see a plan ending in 2042 or 2015, and whether they understand the difference between 28,000 houses or 13.6k to 13,600 houses, and how by bringing a later date to it we muddy the way in which we select the best sites. I think the people of our district deserve the opportunity to answer that question. I certainly, as an individual, don't want a group of people around this table dictating to me which questions should be asked to me or not. So all we're asking is put the question in the consultation. Councillor Crump, you helpfully pointed out how important it was to have residents' views. You talked about engaging with the parishes and engaging with the towns, and I agree with you utterly. I was just saying, let's engage with them, including engaging with them on where the end date should fall. And then we heard from Councillor Milton, although he's not here, but I was at that meeting, how important it is for us to allow the public to properly engage in a discussion and a debate about what this plan means. We talked about focused and digestible, and Mr. Clark, you helpfully said about how you want to make the map interactive, etc. But underneath all of that, what you're trying to do is you're trying to provide an opportunity for residents to have a real meaningful say. And exactly this amendment is asking for that. I won't repeat everything that Councillor Davison has said about the cherry picking and the other things which will go on. So I really, really, really would like this group of councillors to make it clear to the people we serve and the people who've elected us that we believe in local democracy. We genuinely believe in local democracy. And if we genuinely believe in local democracy, we will accept this proposed amendment and we will add a simple question into the document about whether the residents we serve would prefer to have an end date of 2042 or 2050. Thank you.
Thank you, but of course an end date of 2042 means you just start the whole process again and you agree more houses after 2042.
And we can of course explain that to them if the question is there.
And it is part of them, but one of the most crucial things is to make sure that we can actually provide the positive contributions to the communities, such as school places and GP surgeries, and the investment that will be needed for that. But that is up to the members of this committee to make a decision on. So far we do. This process is. Could you, Chief Executive, just say the process to be taken?
I suggested there be a debate in relation to the proposed amendment, at which you'll have a vote, and then you'll move on to the other proposed amendments which are in the paper. Thank you.
I mean, one of the things that we have had a profound problem with is getting enough money and investment for transport links to be able to get one of the settlements that has been worked on in this area on brownfield site actually get that investment in place in the first place, and developers will not contribute, investors will not contribute if the time frame is too short. But Councillor Coucher, do you want to kind of come in at this stage?
Chair, we have debated this issue, I think, at least once, if not twice, within the advisory board, and there are downsides to it. It's a very simplistic thing to say, let's have a shorter plan period because actually we don't need to allocate in as many houses. And if that stands as a bald question, I suspect you'll get universal support for it, but people won't really appreciate, frankly, the downside of that particular approach. And I think it's very important, if that question is to be included, there has to be a pretty heavy memorandum going alongside it in terms of also the other side of it. Okay, yeah, we may have fewer houses actually within the planned period, but we are much less likely to be able to create new settlements. So therefore, basically, there'll be a much greater tendency for it just to be housing estates on the side of existing towns, which is something which we don't want to do. And secondly, I think all of us mentioned the issue of infrastructure and how important that is. Fewer houses mean less money for infrastructure, which means that once again we may well be making compromises here, which basically will cause us to have not the end game that we want. I think scale is important here if we're going to get the attention of government, because we will need government to fund some of this infrastructure. And we need to be there. So I think I'm happy. If you want to put that question in, that's fine. But there needs to be a pretty strong explanation there, so that people aren't just voting or commenting on that purely on the basis of it's going to be fewer houses. Because actually, for many towns, actually a fewer houses probably means you're going to get bigger housing estates on the edge of your town, which I think would be
Councillor
unfortunate.
Cole, do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. Can you actually, yes, you can hear me. Hello. Yes, I think I would agree with Councillor Coucher, and I would also agree with you about the importance of consulting with our residents. I think we all here are here as a result of a fairly extensive consultation process a few months back, and that's why we sit here as representatives as our residents. But I do think with our duty to consult comes the responsibility to inform, so that you are having an open and honest consultation. And I think that, as Councillor Coucher said, you have to ask the question, but also tell them the implications of whether it's a yes or a no. And I think it's very important we make that clear. We in Stratford are aware of what happens if you don't have a particularly perfect infrastructure long-term plan, and the result on communities where they suffer from the lack of that infrastructure being put in place. I don't know if you've had any more luck than us of thinking of an alternative for the word infrastructure. We certainly haven't. But it is the things that bring the communities together, create the communities, your roads and your schools and your GPs and your pharmacies and your letterboxes and your cafes. If we do not have a sufficiently long lead-in period with a sensible strategic plan of what goes on, as Councillor Couch says, we might not get the money, we might end up with poorer communities in terms of the quality of those communities than we might do if we had allowed ourselves to look further. I'm sure we would all agree that the numbers are large in terms of what we're looking at, but I think it is our responsibility to explain to our residents the implications of these different choices and what it might mean for our communities in the longer term. Thank you, Chair.
Does anybody else want to add anything at this stage? Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. We have discussed this numerous times in different settings, shall we say, but also with the advisory group. I think I would endorse Councillor Coucher's point of view that if we do have this, if this question does remain in, then we also have to provide a full account of what the implications are. My feeling is that we have benefited from the advice of consultants and from officers who have experience in dealing with these building a plan, what it means, the implications of this, and how to look forward and design strategies which make for the best way to build a community like this. If the advice from them is to take the longer plan date, then I'm inclined to accept that, because I don't see any. I don't agree with the advantages of the shorter plan date. I think the need for well thought out and to give all the advantage we can do to getting the right kind of infrastructure is a very, very important one to consideration to put forward here. If we are, as I repeat myself, if we are going to put this question in, it has to come complete with a full explanation of what the implications are in either way of accepting the shorter plan date or the longer one. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We certainly need that. I mean, we have one particular settlement, Long Marston, where we it has to have a proper road from it in order to be able to, and we must avoid putting extra burden on one particular bridge coming into Stratford, for example, and trying to find that kind of investment to actually have a complete settlement with all the community facilities on one site, on a brownfield site, has proved immensely problematic. And it's something that we do need to make sure that we are thinking strategically and long term for the best outcome for those communities that we're going to form in the future. We really must make sure that we've got that. Councillor Day.
Chair, thank you for allowing me to come in. It was only really to help Cabinet members if we could get advice from officers, because as I understand it, the new MPPF requires or prefers plan periods to be 30 years, and the plan period to 2050 is in fact 25 years, and at 2042 would clearly be 8 years less than that. So my point being is, if we are being obliged, we're being encouraged to pursue the new MPPF, then a longer plan period rather than a shorter one would be more appropriate.
Thank you for that. That is extremely good, because it only came out today, but I know that officers have had the chance to have a very, very brief look at it. Would you like to make any comments as to what you understand so far from the MPPF?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I can inform members of what the MPPF does say. So the MPPF does require local plans to have a minimum period of at least 15 years. So strategic policies should look ahead over a minimum of 15 years. But it does say where larger scale developments such as new settlements or significant extensions to existing villages and towns form part of the strategy for the area, policies should be set within a vision that looks further ahead, at least 30 years, to take into account the likely timescale for delivery.
So since we are talking about, we are looking in this plan at new settlements, so would those new settlements come under that definition of, in the new NPPF, in your early judgment? Sorry to put you on a spot with that, but would that, come under that kind of definition?
In my opinion, yes.
And have we got anybody else that wants to make any comments to that? Councillor Rock.
Given that point, and I think that obviously I'm just observing this, but and it's something we discussed at the advisory group, but I'm just thinking that I think everybody's keen to give the members of the public maximum say. But given that observation, and given the observation that's been said about the balance between the 2 points that have been made, the two sizes, how we ask the question, if you decide to ask that question, is going to be quite important. If you carry this forward the way it's written, officers have clearly got to go away and decide how to ask that question. And I'm just wondering how we can help officers put that forward in a non-controversial way. So designing that question and the supporting information together with the guidance is going to be quite tricky. Are we going to carry that forward and ask the advisory group to assist with that? Are you going to ask this committee to assist that? Because contriving that question, that's the wrong sort of word, constructing that question, I think is going to be quite fundamental to how it is asked. And we don't want to ask the public a question if we're not allowed to do it at the end of the day, do we?
Would you like to add to any comments to that at this stage?
Just very briefly, Chair. One of the other recommendations that's before the Joint Cabinet Committee tonight is to allow for I can't remember, I haven't got the words in front of me, minor amendments and to the document between now and when we go to consultation. So were this recommendation to be included, then John and myself could work with the two portfolio holders to put some wording around that. And that's how I would propose that we would do it. We don't have very long. We're looking to start the consultation in less than a month's time, and we've got a small matter of Christmas in the way. But we could do that if that was the view.
Councillor King.
Thank you. I'd like to make one further point, is that we, as part of this process, have the benefit of being able to ask questions and hear the professional advice from the officers and consultants on this matter. If we put this question into the public domain, they don't have that benefit.
Fair point. And the other point is that we have a very tight timetable now to get this into consultation and through the consultation, and it has to be completed before the county council election period starts as well. Okay, that's a point. No, okay. Councillor Day.
Only, I hope, a helpful offer in consultation with Councillor Rock. As joint chairs of the advisory group, we stand ready to assist officers and portfolio holders in the refinement, if that would assist the process.
That's appreciated. Okay. So what's the process now from officers? What's the kind of voting and amendment
I believe
process?
Councillor Davison would like to sum up before putting this particular matter to the vote, and then we'll have a vote specifically in relation to the proposed amendment which is in front of us.
Councillor Davison.
Thank you very much, Chair. Lots of good points. Obviously, I don't agree with all of them, but the idea of putting it to the public didn't seem... quite a few people were open to that. Nigel asked how would we do that? Well, if you look in the report, actually, it's pretty well described already. I would ask, of course, the numbers to be added. So the... what was it, 28,000 and 13,500. They'll need to check the numbers, but something like that in terms of new green sites to be done. And that's more or less it. They've done the wording, so it's not that big a task. As was said, it would be recommendation 7. It's leaving officers to get on with it because time is tight. I've said making large amounts of new land available puts the council in a very poor negotiating position with developers who already have sites that they're choosing not to develop. This means it will be more difficult to put in place tough carbon reduction measures. We've heard about that. And also harder to do infrastructure. There's been a lot of talk about infrastructure, and we've got to be honest here, it's always going to be a challenge. Whatever end date, whatever local plan we put, that's going to be a challenge. It doesn't make it any harder if we have fewer sites. I would argue it makes it easier because instead of being cherry picking and splattering around lots of sites, it's focused on fewer that we can make a lot of effort to do well. You said it's struggle if investment is short, yes, but that is linked to the SIL and the S106 agreement, so it comes with the houses. George mentioned we'll get bigger houses. No, we're just putting fewer bits of land forward, which will have the same housing densities and so on put on there. So it's fewer sites coming forwards. It's not that there'll be more there. It's the same number per year as well, remember. It's not saying there'll be fewer houses built for the next 15 years. So that's quite important. Thank you very much, Andrew, for reading out the new NPPF, which I didn't hear, or hadn't read, but it says local plan minimum 15 years, hence a 2042 end date, because that's 15 years after we think this will be adopted. And you need a vision going further ahead. And that's the whole point of what I said. That major settlements, you need a vision, you need a master plan, and it will be built out long beyond the end of the plan period. So that is absolutely in accord with what I'm suggesting. So thank you very much for listening. I do urge us to put it to the people. Thank you.
Could I just seek some clarification, because 15 years was mentioned, but there was also, particularly for settlements, there was in the new NPPF, there was some mention of a longer period. Is that something that we can clarify at that time, this time?
Yeah, well, firstly, as officers, we haven't had the chance to read the updated NPPF in full and digest it yet, but it does refer to, and actually for clarification, I think this is actually also in the previous NPPF anyway. it does say that where you're looking at larger scale developments, such as new settlements or significant extensions to existing villages or towns, policies should be set within a vision that looks further ahead, so at least 30 years, it says.
We will have to take and vote on the proposed amendments. Could you just outline what the process is, Councillor?
Councillor?
Yeah, sorry, David Buckland, Chief Executive.
That's one view. Yeah, so simple vote, Chair. We're going to take this issue in specific isolation to the rest of the agenda. We're just voting at this point, or you're just voting at this point, as to whether to accept or not the proposed amendment which is coming forward. If it isn't agreed by both councils, it won't be taken forward tonight, and then would revert back to the rest of the agenda. But Committee Rule 14.5 is clear in relation to the Constitution for this. They would need the support from both councils for it to be included within the overall recommendations.
Councillor Coucher, you've indicated you want to speak.
Can I just have clarification also, because we have a proposed amendment to the vision statement as well. Is that accepted, or is that going to be voted on separately?
Chair, I'd suggest we restrict ourselves to this one first, proposed amendment first. I take possibly the other three on block, but that would be up to the committee to determine.
Okay, so we have to go to the vote then on this one. It's those that are in favour of the amendment, which is the additional consultation question. Those in favour? And those against?
Okay, so that's lost, Chair. That's lost, Chair.
Okay, thank you. In which case we go forward to the amendments as a whole. Does anybody want to speak to the other amendments that we've got here? We've got section 3.1 amendment, a recommendation 1 alteration, and a recommendation 7 alterations. Would you like to outline, or somebody outline, what those alterations are indicating?
Sorry, Chair, I'm sorry. Before we get to those particular points, there was the recommendation that came forward from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at Warwick. This is quite foreign to me, because we don't exactly have the same processes for recommendations coming forward from the Scrutiny Committee. Perhaps we could consider that recommendation first before we move on to those alterations.
Mr. Clark, or Mr. Comfort, would you like to kind of outline what that recommendation is?
So the recommendation is that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and that's obviously for Warwick District, recommend to Joint Cabinet there be a significant amount of face-to-face consultation that creates dialogue with residents.
Okay, I mean, I think we are going to do things like parish councils and resident surveys. What would that process involve?
Yeah, so we're still working on the consultation strategy ahead of the launch in January. It is proposed that we will have a variety of methods of consultation, as we have done with the 2 previous consultations. That will involve face-to-face dialogue with residents. So what we did I think for both the previous consultations, certainly for the last one, was we did have officers go out into communities, and were there kind of for a morning or an afternoon or all day, and we had some kind of material around the consultation, and were there to answer any questions that members of the public may have. It is our proposal to do the same again.
Can I then put that, Councillor King?
I wholeheartedly support that, the principle of it, but I'm worried about the word significant.
Yes, because in a way it can be interpreted different ways by different people, but I think if we take it to the vote that we do want face-to-face consultation. It's a matter of interpretation, the significant bit of it, isn't it?
Chair, is that a proposal, dare I say, to just remove the words?
Yeah, we could amend. We could just remove the word significant, just to make sure that we we know exactly what that face-to-face consultation is possible, reasonable, that we have the ability to do. What anybody want to say? Anything? Councillor Crump.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what would be helpful is that when you're out in local communities, the local ward member is notified and can help promote it. Because I know there has been consultation in the past, but I can't remember it being really promoted in Southam, for example. So it would be good to know, so local members can promote it, and the more people know about it, hopefully we'll get more people face to speak. So.
And I certainly welcome the ability, I take it on myself, to be honest, as a ward member, always to talk to people in my own area. This is something that I do all the time, and I certainly would welcome that. But it's a matter of whether it's the officers' involvement, I think we're talking about here, as well as ourselves as members.
Yeah, I think
Councillor
it's just
Williams.
we can promote it, that's all.
Yeah.
We can promote
Yeah. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. And there was a discussion, because I was at that committee, about the level of resource that officers can bring to it. But at the end of that discussion, significant was a very important word. So I would counsel against removing it, because that would be contrary to the will of the ONS committee. So because they were just basically saying, this is such an important development for our district that we need to make an effort, a meaningful effort, to engage with residents. And I think the word significant is important in that meaning.
I certainly take the word meaningful. In a way, it means more than. But Mr. Clark.
Yeah, just very briefly, if I may. Yes, I mean, it is certainly the officer intention to deliver as much of the consultation face-to-face as we can. We have a small officer team, we have a finite amount of time, finite resources, and we have quite a large population and a large geographic area to cover. So it's about trying to find the most effective ways of consulting as we can. But certainly last time, and again, I'm not as close to the details of what the officer team is looking at in terms of exactly what the consultation involves. But it will certainly involve face-to-face, and we had roadshows, exhibitions, out in communities, so we could talk to people that way. I think Councillor Crump's suggestion is a very good one. That's an easy win. We can easily make sure that councillors are informed. And just as a suggestion, in working up the consultation and in hearing both the tone and the words of this group, maybe we could work with the two portfolio holders just to think about doing that as effectively as possible.
Councillor Davison.
Thank you. We've already heard tonight that the document is a bit heavy and unwieldy, so I'd hope we'd all agree that at the moment 100% effort needs to be from officers on making the online consultation as easy as possible. So until it goes live, don't worry about consultation, worry about getting it really good. Don't go to the public, but make sure it's really good so people can access it, because that's how most people they'll go online and then they'll get cross, and we don't want that. We want it to be as easy as possible. Kenilworth Town Council has got ahead of the game, and they've already invited both officers and councillors, and both Councillor King and I have said we will go along. Didn't say what officers will do, that's up to them at the time, but we did say to them, and this is echoing Phil's point, that they should invite neighbouring parish councils along as well, so it's not going around every single one, it's trying to be efficient. So I would hope both officers and councillors can do their bit to promote it and get it as widespread as possible. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. And I actually remember, because I've been a councillor for such a long time, taking a local plan through before the period of online or any websites at all, way back in 1999, so a long, long time ago, and public meetings having to be taken there, and they were extremely popular, and being able to explain to people was something that people did appreciate. So thank you. We'll leave it as it is, but take it to the vote. So if we vote on that recommendation, all those in favour? That's passed then, thank you very much. The process now is...
Okay, Chair, we have 3 further changes which are proposed.
I think officers need to...
Yeah, recommendation 1 and recommendation 7 purely reflect, as I understand the publication today of the revised NPPF. I wonder whether officers might help in relation to section 3.1.
Could you kind of outline why these alterations and these amendments are put, just to say it is the NPPF, but specifically what the other thought was?
Yes,
Councillor Coucher.
Chair, I really want to speak to the revision to the vision statement, which is the amendment to section 3.1. What we wanted to do was to make sure that there was a rather better balance in that vision, that we were actually addressing the needs of local communities, because as it had been drafted beforehand, it looked as if we were accommodating the requirements of the West Midlands conurbation on almost an equal measure. Our view is that we need to look at our local requirements first. If we have a duty to cooperate, then we will look at that in due course. So the vision statement is amended really to make sure that we are seen to be strengthening our local communities.
Thank you very much indeed. And the other changes are to do with the NPPF that has come out today. Councillor Williams, sorry.
I'd just like to thank Councillor Coucher. I think that vision is strengthened and is extremely helpful, so thank you for the work on that.
Any other comments that want to be made? Councillor Davison?
I'd agree with that. I'd agree with the other alterations. NPPF means it is mandated. In the recommendation 7, if you can check the sort of introduction to the consultation, that it makes it very clear that we are mandated, we have to allocate land for this number of houses, because some people think we have a choice, we don't. Or the only choice, or the main choice we have is where does housing and employment land go. So I'm agreeing, but just emphasising with the recommendation 7 to be clear on that aspect.
I think a lot of people, we do have to emphasise that any local plan not only has to go to consultation, but it has to be inspected by an independent inspector. And that independent inspector, his duty is to assess whether or not we have prepared it in line with all legal requirements or mandatory requirements from government, and whether or not it is sound. If we don't do that, we'll be left in a hiatus without a local plan. We have bitter experience of not having a local plan in Stratford, where we found ourselves without one, and a considerable cost to this council as a result of not having that local plan, and development happening without us being able to control it or being able to mandate any of the infrastructure as well. So we do need a local plan, so it must go through an inspector and be judged and be found sound that it does comply with the legal requirements. So, and I do, having been through one local plan, I do remember that.
Good. So that's agreed. That make those points strongly at the beginning, please.
Councillor Rock.
Yeah, just as a point of information that follows up on Councillor Davidson's comments, that I've attended, I think, all the information sessions that our councillors have had, and the comments that you made, that this is, I don't want to say enforced by above on these changes, but to get the plan forward, we've got to follow these things and put in these comments in, and strengthening and reinforcing it has the support of the comments that I've heard from the members of this council. So I think it is supported in a wider section across the councillors here.
Can I thank everybody for all their comments and for the constructive and respectful debate today on a very, very difficult issue. We now have to be able to put these amendments to the vote. Can I have a proposer for the amendments that we have before us? Councillor Coucher, and a seconder, Councillor Davison. So we have the amendments before us. Are you all agreed to that amendment? I'm agreed. Right. Okay, all agreed, and that is unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. And that means that we go to the final recommendations as amended, and the recommendations which are on page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
just 5 and 6.
5 and 6, okay. No, it's I'm just throwing over the pages here. Okay.
It's recommendations 1 to number 8.
1 to 8. Are you all agreed with those? We have to have a proposer. Councillor Davison, are you proposing?
I can propose. I won't make this as, and I can't find the bit, I won't make it a formal change, but in the recommendations it says the date to start is January rather than giving the actual date. In the document it gives the date. Can we have assurance from officers that it is that date that we're starting on?
We can assure that the date is as...
Yes,
yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to propose all of
You'll
those.
propose it, okay. And Councillor Coucher is going to second it. Can I ask for those who are able to vote to say whether or not you're accepted? Thank you very much indeed. We've all unanimously accepted that. So thank you very much indeed. And that, therefore, I think reaches the end of the meeting. Are there any other? Is there any urgent business? I don't think we've been notified of any urgent business. Councillor Rock, did you want to bring
just
in?
a point of information? I think officers are empowered to make minor adjustments. So if I can refer you to my comment earlier on about the travellers and boat people, I think that can be dealt with by officers in due course.
And your comment about the energy, yes, the officers will take all those into account. Now, the process now is that there is a consultation, but this is not the end of the end of the matter either. It means that it goes out to consultation. We then come back and take into account what the response is from the consultation before we go to the final documentation. And there will be a weaning out of some of the proposals because of the responses that we get. So I look forward to meeting you all again for the next stage. But meanwhile, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And thank you all for your attendance tonight. Thank you.